Welcome to Fringe Element here on the 440 Sports Network. My name is Braden Gall. You can follow me on Twitter at Braden Gall.
Mine is Aaron Dugan. You can follow me on Twitter at the Aaron Dugan or Instagram Aaron_Dugan.
Welcome back to the pod. The band is back together. We've got a great guest today, and we've got a fun couple of topics on the show. Our spring power rankings and number of returning starters for every team in the SEC. We'll get to all of that today. Neal McCready going to join us. Of course, rebelgrove.com is the website, the officially licensed site of the Rivals.com network, covering the old Mississippi Rebels, to give us an Ole Miss State of the Union. So that's coming up a little bit later on in the show as well. So spring practice, we'll sort of poo-poo spring practice a bit here at the beginning, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a spring practice poo-pooer, and that's fine. Of course, before we do that, Aaron Dugan, Fringe Element, is brought to you by
Jaspers, the new game capital of the Music City, which is the capital of Tennessee.
Yes. Well done.
Thank you.
Little geography with your ad read. Always a nice touch. Yes, the renovated game room. We've obviously got NCAA tournament games wrapping up. You got the Final Four this weekend, but you also have the NFL draft coming up. You've got spring games if you care about that. Of course, Preds games. Anything that's going on in the world of sports. You got the Masters coming up. So make sure you check the new game room out at Jaspers. Skee ball, Pop-A-Shot, air hockey, life-size Jenga, Connect Four, shuffleboard, literally almost darts, literally every possible awesome bar game is now in the Jaspers game room. So go check out the new game room at Jaspers. All the other great stuff is still there, right? The parking is still free. The food is still amazing. And, of course, Aaron's taglines are still exceptional and extraordinary. So there's that.
Ish.
So
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, before we get into Neal McCready coming up a little bit later on with our Ole Miss State of the Union and our spring power rankings, I did word something last week on the show that might have misled the audience as to what you were doing last week. When I said something along the lines of like dealing with some stuff, like I didn't really mean it in like a negative way.
He made it sound like I was going through something, and indeed,
yeah.
I was, but it was not
security.
what you would think.
You're going through TSA at the airport.
I was going through I was going through customs.
Customs, because all she did was party her ass off in Cabo last week, and that is why she couldn't be here with you, the fine folks of the Fringe Element Podcast.
Listen, everyone needs a reset. I won't say that it feels like a reset at this particular moment, but yes, one of my best friends is getting married, and her bachelorette was in Cabo.
How's the old bod feeling these days?
I will say that I could have slept from 2 days ago and through today.
Yep.
But I'm here.
If you'd like to see more, check out Aaron Dugan on the Instagram at Aaron_Dugan.
Yep. I've got some hot friends. I'm not going to lie.
I did not say that. I just said, if you're going to tell people on accident what your co-host is doing, and then everyone just goes and watches her just party her ass off in Cabo for a week.
What's she going through? She's going through something tough.
Well, that's why I like that voice, by the way. We should do an entire press conference with just that particular voice from Aaron Dugan.
It's like, what do you feel like happened on offense?
I misrepresented what.
Go ahead.
God,
we're talking over each other now.
Never mind. I was kidding. Don't do that voice anymore.
Okay.
I misrepresented you, so I apologize to the audience. That was my fault. So.
Mm-hmm. And I did not think that I was going through a tumultuous time last week. I knew that it was a very privileged experience. So on we go.
Check out the YouTube page as well, Aaron, and the fam doing great work to get the show up there each and every week. Mitch and I had a great time last week hanging out without you. So don't worry about it. You weren't missed. It's cool.
Okay,
all right.
Perfect.
All right. So our spring power rankings, we're going to give you 14-1, and we're going to run down returning starters according to Athlon Sports, which is also where I work. Where you used to work, and we're going to give you the official returning starters for every team in the SEC and give you sort of our preliminary spring power rankings in the conference. However, I think to begin this conversation, I want to make sure I make this clear to people. I think spring practice is incredibly important, but I don't think being perfect in spring practice is that important. I don't think what actually happens from like a position battle standpoint outside of maybe the quarterbacks is all that important, because you're going to have another battle in the summer and then another battle in fall camp and all this other stuff. I just don't think it's all that big of a deal to watch the details of spring practice. I don't think it matters. And so I'm not going to be sitting here, breaking down the Auburn offensive line's walkthrough at spring practice, because I just don't find it all that interesting. To me, it's important that they're practicing, and that's the big thing, is that it's still very important. I just don't think the details are that important.
Well, it's really just, I do feel like people are reaching when you try to make these big overarching evaluations of a team's potential based on spring practice. I think we're just sometimes a little overeager and we miss football, and we really try to extrapolate it out to mean more than it does. When I was working at Vanderbilt, to me, the most telling things, and of course I knew a little bit more being around the program all the time, but from the outside, even people were coming in, I think the most telling thing is chemistry of the team. How excited are the guys? How excited are the coaches? How high energy are the practices? And then also, if you're looking closely, you can figure out maybe who's still struggling injury wise, although we don't really want that to be, most schools don't want that to be common knowledge. And yes, the quarterback battle. Any of the other battles, like you just mentioned, they're not as decisive as the quarterback battles. Maybe some of the positions on the line are, but a lot of the other, position drills and guys battling for those positions just aren't as decisive as the quarterback, because your playbook is, larger.
Well, like, you're not going to figure out who your left guard is in spring practice, or maybe you figure out who your wide receiver number 2 is, or something like that. But like, you're not really going to find out a whole lot of that stuff in spring. You got especially now with roster management the way it is, with transfers and, kids showing up in the summertime and early enrollees and all this stuff. Like, it's just going to be so different in the fall. So again, I'm not trying to poo-poo everything you read about spring practice. Again, I think the quarterback battles are important. I just that's not what we're going to talk about on the show today. We're going to dive into who these teams have coming back, sort of largely in these position groups that are important to us. We'll compare them to some of the teams around the country and to each other, and we'll do it in the form of our spring power rankings. You want to get to it? Are you ready for this?
Yes, I wish we had theme music. Like right when you said that, I was hearing like a theme song in my head,
like Price is Right, like ba-da,
mine was less cheeky, but yeah, mine was more like dun 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 dun.
Is that a Western? What is that?
I don't really know. Actually.
I should know what that is. All right, number 14. Anyways. Number 14 on the list. No more singing from either of us or Valley Girl voices. Okay. Number 14 on the list. Vanderbilt Commodores.
Yep. I'll see it.
Blue. Six returning starters on offense, 6 returning starters on defense, 12 total for the Vanderbilt Commodores. That is right in the middle of the pack in the conference. So not among the most returning starters, not among the fewest. Clark Lee is, I think, lost 20. I mean, Vanderbilt, I think, has lost 21 straight. And if you count the new rebrand, which we have not talked about with you, 22 straight games, if you want to count the rebranding as a loss, taking an L there, with your new Power V that looks like, let's be honest, like Villanova, Xavier, and the History Channel had a threesome. Let's be honest about that.
I've seen it compared to Borat. I've seen it compared. It's, you know what? I don't feel the need to hold back from my alma mater on this. It's horrible. Why? No one asked for it. In fact, they had meetings with people that acting like they're taking people's opinion in and considering everyone. Everybody said they didn't want the rebrand, and I hate it. So
there you have it, folks.
I protect them sometimes. I'm not doing it today. I hate it. I don't know why we did it.
And I hate it. It does look like an upside down pair of bell bottoms. Let's be honest. Looks like some pants from the 70s. Anyway,
super upset.
Anyway, 12 returning starters, 21 straight losses. They have to improve the overall talent on the roster, but they do have some pieces there. I don't know how many of them are very good, but 12 starters back for Vanderbilt.
You just have to hope that Vanderbilt's heading in the right direction. I mean, we know that there's some talent at the quarterback position. That's just not enough, with Ken Seals and Mike Wright still kind of battling for that, both coming back as juniors. I just have to hope that we're seeing some kind of improvement. It's
finding a quarterback would go a long way. There's
yeah.
No question.
and then from there, hopefully you can start to build some pieces around it, but it's going to be a minute.
And if you'd like to hear an in-depth Vanderbilt State of the Union, check out our episode last week with Mitch Light, some guy who did the Vanderbilt State of the Union. Number 13 on the list. Don't add us here, okay? because these next three are about the same. We had a tough time deciding on these, but we're putting South Carolina at 13. Obviously, Spencer Rattler is on the roster. He does not count. They actually have 15 returning starters, 8 on offense and 7 on defense. That is second most in the entire conference. But we still have some questions about this team overall. I could see South Carolina being 12th, maybe 11th in the power rankings. I'm okay with that debate between the next two teams, but I also have a lot of questions on South Carolina's ability to replicate what they did last year.
I agree. I do think I won't call it luck, but I do feel like the cards fell in South Carolina's favor on a couple of close games last season. So if that can happen for them again, then they may come out with something that looks, a little bit better than expected, or looks like it should be higher than 13th on our list. We're going to talk about standout players too.
Go for
Braden?
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Talk about whatever you want. It's your podcast.
This is easier with, some other teams we're looking at. It's hard to pick. I kind of honed in on Jaheim Bell for South Carolina, their tight end. Just in turn, if we're going to talk about guys specifically, just his ability to add value after he catches the ball. He's good at breaking tackles. He just showed a lot of potential for South Carolina. So he's kind of who I just had my sights set on if I had to pick one. I think he's going to be someone fun to watch this season.
Okay. There you have it. 8 starters back on offense, which again does not include Spencer Rattler and any other transfer portal people they've brought in. So they've got a lot of guys back.
It's how they fit together.
Yeah. And I think Shane Beamer does some things really well. This is where we're going to learn. Can he develop? Can he coach? Can he scheme? This is where we're going to learn. Is this offseason we're going to find out, because you're right. Luck's not the right word, but when you get Auburn and Florida when they got him, and to get them like they got him, I think that's fortuitous, at least to say the least. So, and I'm okay with Gamecocks fans being pissed off about that. In fact, I take it back. You can at me. It's fine. You can be mad at me because I think Missouri, South Carolina are basically even. We've got Missouri at 12 here on our list. They actually returned 8 starters on defense, 6 starters on offense. That's 14 total, which is fourth in the SEC, behind a couple of teams here that we're going to get to, and behind South Carolina. They went hard into the portal, brought a bunch of guys back, trying to fix their defense. They lost their quarterback, Connor Bazelak. It's an interesting team. Eli Drinkowitz, year 3. Again, State of the Union, Dave Matter from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch a couple of weeks ago. Make sure you check that out. They've got some weapons that are going to be good on offense. The question is whether or not the defense can show improvement or not.
Who sticks out to you on offense?
Well, I mean, Luther Burden is, the big 5-star freshman at wide receiver. I think he's a name that everybody's sort of captivated by and can't wait to see. The new defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, needs to show some major progress. They hit I think they've got 14 guys back, 8 of them on defense, but they weren't particularly good on defense. They were terrible on defense. So how much of that is good players? I don't know. That one's a tough one. They went defensive line. I think they went portal heavy on the defensive line. So we'll see. I could see South Carolina being better than Missouri pretty easily. So.
These were hard. We had little sections of 3 and 4 teams that were nearly impossible. Those being 2 of them. I think we can move on.
Yeah. Number 11 on the list, the Auburn Tigers, and frankly, Auburn could be 13, but we put Auburn at 11, just ahead of South Carolina, Missouri, based on talent alone. The Auburn Tigers will bring back 6 starters on offense and 5 starters on defense. That is 11 total. Some of the fewest talent returning of anybody in the SEC. Huge question marks at the coaching staff, huge question marks at quarterback. You lose a bunch of star power on defense with McClain and McCreary and Monday all leaving. You got 2 new coordinators. The running backs are great, but I don't think you've got, I don't know, like this whole entire thing feels like it's teetering on the brink of an implosion, which means they probably could be below South Carolina and Missouri in theory.
It's not the same kind of chaos that we've seen with LSU in the past, but it does give us a very hard time in terms of just what in the world do we do with the information that we have? And there's so many moving parts that it's hard to put them together and make any kind of real good guesstimate of what it's going to look like. Obviously, you have Tank Bigsby at running back, like Braden just mentioned, and, his ability, talk about your ability to make plays after contact. He's off the charts in that sense. His athleticism can do big things for them, but he can't do that by himself. On defense for them, Jalen Simpson, their cornerback, is one of their cornerbacks, is one of the most impressive athletes on the team. I think he just needs a little bit more time. He's not afraid to come across the center of the field. He's not afraid of contact. And so a little bit more playing time for him, and hopefully some help on defense would at least get Auburn moving in the right direction.
I like that. A player to watch on Auburn's defense. That's good stuff right there. I appreciate that. Number 10, and we'll let Neal McCready do some of the work on this, because he seems to think they're going to have a really great start to the year. The schedule's pretty light, but that the last five or so weeks are pretty brutal. So this team could be pretty solid, but also fall to 7-5. I would also argue that the SEC could see 10, 11, 12 teams get bowl eligible. So even some of these teams we're talking about right now, Aaron, we've got Ole Miss at number 10. They have 5 returning starters on offense and 6 on defense, so 11 total. So not a lot, but that a lot of guys back in the secondary. They lost some guys in the front 7. Obviously, Matt Corral's the biggest one, but he seems to think that this team, like there's some, even though they might take a step back or two, that this is still going to be a pretty solid football team.
I think so too. And since they do have some guys returning in those line positions, like we've talked about many times before, Nick Broker's the first one that comes to mind, but we've talked about this before in terms of upperclassmen leadership, just quote unquote, just hits different when it's on the line. It means more to have upperclassmen leadership in those particular positions. Nick Broker is a great example of that. Blindside blocker for the Rebels, and is upperclassman, is a leader not only on the field, but off the field. So some of that will help them, I think. But again, the quarterback is a big loss for them.
Yeah, Jackson Dart coming in from USC doesn't count as a returning starter, but should be the guy. Luke Altmaier's the other one that they're going to battle with. And again, McCready talks a lot about the sort of how they're going to replace the running backs, how they're going to replace the receiving core, all that stuff. So also, how are they going to replace the coaching staff as well? They got new coordinators on basically both sides of the ball. Chris Partridge there calling the plays now on defense for old Mississippi.
Old Mississippi.
Number 9, the Florida Gators, and they have as many returning starters as anybody in the SEC except for Mississippi State. They have 15 returning starters, 7 on offense, 8 on defense, and the only teams in America that have more returning starters than the Florida Gators: Mississippi State, as we mentioned, Kansas, Iowa, NC State. They all have 17 returning starters. Clemson, Syracuse, and Florida State have 16 returning starters. And then Wake Forest, Pittsburgh, Purdue, Maryland, South Carolina, and Florida. So Florida's returning a bunch of guys that have playing experience. The problem is their defense was terrible last year, and it got their coach fired. So I think this is going to take a year, but I think this is going to be a team that shows improvement right away.
Well, like you alluded to this, but they do have a lot of guys coming back, but it's not really upperclassmen. Florida, we talked about this a few weeks ago in terms of how many freshmen and sophomores were on Florida's roster, and it's like an insane number, like almost no upperclassmen. So although they do have a lot of guys coming back, they don't have guys coming back in those main leadership upperclassmen positions. They have still a very young team. Now, what that means for them in 2 years could be really, really good things. Yep. But for now, you have to just rely pretty heavily on Anthony Richardson to try to fill pretty big shoes and wait on some of these guys to mature, or at least get reps.
So this is where it got really interesting for us. Like, you and I were going back and forth on this, trying to figure out who is basically 4 through 8 in the SEC. Like, the top 3 are pretty easy to pinpoint. And while we debated a lot in those last couple of slots, and with Florida and Ole Miss, even just back and forth, that there seems to be these next 4 or 5 teams are basically dead even. So don't get offended here. This is just how we feel about them right now in the spring, and how many returning starters there are. But like, this is hard for me.
It was hard.
We put Arkansas at number 8. And they only have 9 returning starters. It's some of the fewest returning starters in all of college football. In fact, there's only a there's only like 6 or 7 teams in all of Power 5 football that have fewer returning starters. You lose Treylon Burks, KJ Jefferson is back. They're going to have to find some pieces along both lines of scrimmage. But I really like this team. I really like this program and where they're at. But the defense wasn't maybe as good as people expected. Over 6 yards per play in SEC play on defense. Tough schedule, tough division, really good team. I don't know. We put him at 8, Aaron. How do you feel about that?
We almost had to, because this is what we said before we jumped on today. Braden kind of tried to pin me down and say Mississippi State or Arkansas. And I was like, my heart wants to say Arkansas, not only because my love for Sam Pittman, but just because what they're doing in that program. They're keeping especially in coaching, keeping people in their positions. They almost seem like they're on a Kentucky trajectory to me, trying to build something that's going to last for a long time. And although we may not see it completely pay off this year, I do think they have a lot of strong things in place. But when you look at the guys, the amount of guys they have returning versus Mississippi State, it was hard to pick 9 returning guys versus 17. And so that's why we put them where we did. There are impactful guys, senior linemen like Ricky Stromberg, that I think are going to be able to, again, lead guys on the field and off of the field. But we ultimately had to put them below Mississippi State just because of the pure amount of experience returning.
Well, and we have Tennessee at number 7. They have 14 starters coming back. Tennessee has 8 starters on offense, including Hendon Hooker. All 4 of the 5 offensive linemen. They have 6 guys back on defense. That's where they're going to have to make a lot of progress is on the defensive side of the ball. I trust Arkansas more, but Tennessee returns a lot more around their starting quarterback, and they play in the easier division. So it's sort of like if we're talking about which program do we believe in, like from a culture standpoint or buy-in, or like you said, kind of feels like it's got a Kentucky build here. I trust Arkansas over Mississippi State or LSU or Tennessee, but it just doesn't feel like this particular Arkansas team. And maybe I'm dead wrong about this. Maybe we're just way off and we're not giving enough credit to some of the new pieces that are going to step in, but it feels like I trust this program more, but I'm not sure if they're, if Mississippi State's not just one game better this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Tennessee too, like you said. And all that to say, I'm not to shit on Tennessee's culture either, because I think they're definitely heading in the right direction. And maybe, they have 14 guys coming back, and maybe some of that excitement can help kind of give them a little bit of an adrenaline boost going into the season and help them grab a couple more wins. But yeah, when you look at just what Arkansas is able to do, it just sometimes feels like they don't need as many key pieces because their puzzle sort of fits together better. Tennessee, in my opinion, needs those standout guys and experience just lately to be able to pull anything off. But it's early. Could be dead wrong.
If I was gambling, I would gamble on Mississippi State and Tennessee to have more wins than Arkansas, but that Arkansas might be the better team than both of them.
Yep.
That's sort of
sounds
where
right.
That's how I feel. And LSU is a complete wild card in all of this. We'll get to them in just a second. Mississippi State at number 6, the most returning starters of any team in the SEC and the most returning starters of anybody in the entire country in the Power 5. 17 returning starters, 9 on offense, 8 on defense. I really like on defense with this group. They bring back a lot of guys. And Will Rogers comes back after basically what would have been breaking every single SEC record on the planet if it wasn't for Joe Burrow and Bryce Young. So Mike Leach, 3rd year. There's just a lot to like about where this roster and this team is. I don't know if Mike Leach can sustain it, but right now on this particular moment in this spring, it feels like this is a pretty good Mississippi State team that I think people are going to overlook.
Mike Leach is interesting to me because it's almost like Mississippi State and their fans feel like they have this secret weapon. And not that I don't recognize what Mike Leach is able to do, but it does feel like they think he's this well-kept secret, that things are going better inside the program than other people are recognizing. Like, I look at Mike Leach and I'm like, oh, it's kind of crazy what he's been able to pull off. And he's such a wild card in interviews, and he's so funny and so entertaining. But Mississippi State they seem very confident in what they have going on inside their program and their fan base. So they seem like they've got more of an ego than I think they should have, but I think not in a bad way, but just they think Mike Leach is the best thing that ever happened. And I respect him, but I don't totally know, like you said, if he can sustain it for forever. But maybe they know something I don't.
I think they're in a really good spot for this year. But like, how long can they keep Zach Arnett as a defensive coordinator? How long is Will Rogers going to be the starting quarterback? Like, to me, those are some of the questions about Mississippi State. But I don't think those are questions about this year's team.
Yeah.
I mean, they gave up 5.8 yards per play on defense last year, which is not like elite, but it's pretty damn good for a team that is as good as they are on offense. So a lot where I can already tell there's always these teams, Aaron, that I spend like all summer sort of like pumping up. Like last year it was Kentucky, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I spent all year last year, all summer talking about Kentucky, and turns out I was right. And Mississippi State I'm feeling some Kentucky vibes from last year Kentucky to this year Mississippi State. I feel like I'll be talking a lot about Mississippi State this summer. I feel like.
Well, a lot to be said when you actually are put in a position where you can build on something, and now your playbook can become more perfected, more creative, as you have guys with experience under their belt. So I hope they do it. I'd love to see them do well.
So number 5 on our list, and this might be controversial, but LSU at number 5. And that's probably much higher than anyone else has them ranked. So go ahead and post this all over LSU message boards if you'd like. But to me, it's about Brian Kelly and his instantaneous track record of results and success, packaged with a roster that has been recruited very well. It's not quite the same as Florida. It's a little different. I think they've got better talent than Florida. And I think Brian Kelly's a more proven winner than Billy Napier, at least for right now. He's got to replace 4 starters along the offensive line, but they've got really good talent at quarterback. They've got one of the best receivers in America. I just think LSU is poised. I have no clue if this means LSU can beat Alabama routinely, or Brian Kelly can recruit at the highest levels, or they're going to win titles. I don't think any of that yet. But what I think he's very good, I think he's so good that, and their roster is good enough that with all the portal action that they got, that this team can get good quickly. I don't know how good, but I think they're going to be significantly improved right away. So we got LSU at number 5.
Well, the only way the culture can go is up, because it's just been a mess. It's been complete chaos. And with that being said, we'll know quick. I don't know exactly what we will know, but I think we'll know in the next year or two if this team's trajectory is going. It's going to go up. I don't see how it doesn't, but I just don't know, like you said, if that's at the level. Are you going to be competing and beating Alabama, or at least playing them close? Georgia, Texas A&M, which, those two teams tend to play each other a little bit more closely. But in terms of weapons, like you said, Keyshawn Boutte, and then on defense, they have a couple of guys, BJ Ojulari. Is that how you say it, Braden?
Yeah.
Ojulari. Yep. Is great, super, super talented, arguably maybe the most athletic player that they have, but you are missing some key pieces. You lost a couple guys to the NFL. So even though you have someone coming in to kind of step in, you did lose some guys. So lots of moving pieces still at LSU, which has been the trend for the last, feels like forever.
Fewest returning starters of any Power 5 team in all of America. 3 on offense, 3 on defense for LSU. I could argue some of that's a good thing. That they're replacing some of those pieces, and that they have really good quality pieces on their roster. To me, this is like the Brian Kelly plateau. He's going to get them to the plateau pretty quickly. 10 wins, 10-2, 9-3, whatever that number is, he's going to get them there pretty fast. The question is, do they just plateau there and just stay there, or can they challenge for that next tier, which is why he took the job in the first place. Number 4, and I can't believe I'm saying that, the Kentucky Wildcats return only 10 starters, 5 on offense, 5 on defense, and are 4th in our power rankings out of a lot of different reasons. Trust in the defense, trust in Mark Stoops. You've got the quarterback coming back and believe us, but they've got to replace some. They've got 3 starters on the offensive line gone, and they've got to replace their coordinator. I don't know how much more trust we could put in Kentucky right now.
Yeah, we're definitely just banking on history repeating itself. But some key, the system that has been built at Kentucky is still there. And I think over the course of the last decade, we've seen that built the right way and are kind of just trusting that it's going to continue to work that way. You've got guys like Chris Rodriguez at running back. I mean, we could talk about these individual guys, but it's just, it's less about them and more about just trusting that Mark Stoops is going to continue to make this work.
Well, and like I thought about LSU at 4, but like Kentucky beat them, just destroyed them last year. But again, that's a different coach. So I really do think 4 through 10, Kentucky, LSU, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Arkansas, Florida, and Ole Miss. I think this is as strong and as healthy a 4 through 10 as we've ever seen in this league. Because I think the bottom 4 and the top 3 are pretty clear. Like that if I had to, kind of put lines of demarcation in there.
And honestly, it's almost always been pretty 4 distinct categories, at least, in my recent memory. It's been, you've had the top 2 or 3, you've had the next 3, you've had the not the shittiest 3 right above the bottom, then you've had the 3 in the bottom. I think
not shittiest 3. That's a nice label there.
You've had the second. To me, it's been broken into 4 tiers in recent history.
Right. It's more clear who these sort of middle of the pack to bottom half teams are, whereas it feels like if Florida and Ole Miss are 9 and 10, that is a really good 9 and 10.
Yeah, because it's just
I think
I didn't say that well. The very, very top 3, you got the very bottom, and the middle is all kind of pretty strong. Didn't know where to put them, and normally there's there's some towards the bottom that aren't Vanderbilt that aren't great.
Yep, a lot of love. Like to rank Kentucky in the top 25 or put them at 4 in the SEC with only 10 starters coming back is an extraordinary testament to what Mark Stoops has accomplished.
Yep.
Texas A&M at number 3, pretty easy to put them at number 3. Quarterback battle is going to be huge. They only have 9 returning starters, 4 on offense, 5 on defense. They're going to have to find replace some high level NFL talent on the defensive line and the offensive line. But they've recruited so well that I think they're going to plug those holes. So A&M at 3.
Yep. A-Chain, they may not have the most amount of players coming back. They have, who else did we just say had 9?
Arkansas has 9.
Arkansas
has 9.
But it just, the talent level of the guys that they are returning, and again, the system, what Jimbo Fisher's been able to do and competing, really giving these very top tier teams a run for their money, has us believing that they could probably do that again.
So again, Georgia fans, you might think this is controversial, but I have Georgia. We have Georgia at 2, and we have Alabama at 1. And Georgia returns 10 starters, 7 on offense. So the offense is in really good shape. They lose a lot of playmakers. Just 3 on defense, but we're not really worried about that side of the ball. They're just going to throw waves of dudes at you, which is basically what happened on the bachelorette party in Cabo, I heard. And then Bama.
You heard nothing.
Bama at number 1. I think, unfortunately for Georgia, I don't think this is a function of Georgia taking a step back. I think Georgia's a top 2 or 3 team in America. I think they absolutely could repeat and win a national championship. This is not a knock on Georgia. I think Alabama is this salty this year. Bryce Young on offense, 8 starters back on defense, 13 starters for Alabama back. Their defense is going to be sick. Bryce Young is still Bryce Young. Unfortunately for Georgia, I just think this is one of those where Bama got beat a couple times. Now they're going to come back and show us that Nick Saban's the greatest coach of all time. I just think Bama is really, really good.
They are, but if we want to plant a little bit of Georgia excitement that I guess a lot of Georgia fans already know about, but let's talk good about Georgia for a second on offense, like Braden mentioned.
Let's talk good about them. Let's go.
Let's talk good about them.
Yeah,
on
baby.
Defense, again, we're not worried, but people I'm very excited to watch for Georgia on offense. Arian Smith, who is an actual legitimate track star at Georgia, runs track for the university, had a lot of they didn't have as many. You didn't see him all over. He wasn't everywhere, but what he did do was impressive. His ability to make chunk plays. I think we'll see a lot more of him this year. He was derailed by an injury last season, but I think he'll be a standout guy. And Brock Bowers has already been really fun to watch. Tight end who just completely. Ridiculous. What'd you say?
It's just ridiculous.
You look up it. Yeah. He runs routes like a receiver. I mean, you look up and he's gone. It's a level of production for him that I just don't remember seeing as a true freshman tight end before. I think that the sky is the limit for him, and he is extremely entertaining to watch.
Yeah, what's unfortunate is the only name that truly comes to mind as a player at that position with that level of athleticism is Aaron Hernandez. Like that's the name that comes to mind. Like just the ability to get him the ball in space and do so many different things.
Yep.
Like that's I mean, they lined up Aaron Hernandez in the backfield. Like that's what they did. Handed him the football. So
that's going to become a household name. Oh, well, Aaron Hernandez.
Oh, Brock Bowers already is.
Yeah. I mean, but hopefully in a different way than.
I don't think it's hopeful. I think it will be in a different way, and already is in a different way than the murderer. And obviously, the Brock Bowers is a national champion. So I guess they have that in common too. So
yeah, so
national champions.
Same, but different.
Geez, how did we get here? Bama at number 1. So our power rankings: Bama, Georgia, Texas A&M, Kentucky 4, LSU 5, Mississippi State 6, Tennessee 7, Arkansas 8, Florida 9, Ole Miss 10, Auburn 11, Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt wrapping up your list. Ada, send us your power rankings. Listen, if you guys want to argue with us about 4 through 10, I am totally fine with that. I think you can make a great case for a lot of these different teams, but we wanted to lay out all the number of returning starters, who's bringing back what, and sort of give you a spring look at where we think the conference is from top to bottom today on the show. Anything else you want to throw at him, Aaron Dugan? Anything?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Good. Well, good stuff then, man. When we come back, you'll hear from Neal McCready of rebelgrove.com covering the Ole Miss Rebels. He'll give us our State of the Union for Lane Kiffin. Is he leaving? Is Lane Kiffin going to stay? Who's going to be the quarterback? Is the defense going to be better? The coaching staff, all that great stuff from Neal when we come back right here on Fringe Element. Fringe Element, Aaron Dugan, is brought to you by the wonderful folks at
Jaspers. Jaspers is Braden and I's only location that we hang out outside of work. It is the only thing that can get us to be in each other's presence when we're not doing the podcast. Wow. Mainly because I'm not ever invited to Braden's parties and he's not ever invited to mine.
What parties do I have, honestly?
You had a soccer party. I
had a soccer party?
Didn't you have when
like a watch party?
Yeah.
Yeah, at a different bar. Thanks a lot for the ad.
Wait, no. I'm talking about the one at your house. You had a Super Bowl party I wasn't invited to?
I did not have a Super Bowl party. What you're making, this is all erroneous. Well, these are all counterfactual.
It's not erroneous because I'm just misnaming what party it was. But there were parties. We had a
Super Bowl party that was for the 4 of us. Like me and my daughters and my wife.
No, there was another party I wasn't invited to. Trust me, I remember.
We went and watched the Tennessee. We went and watched the first round of the NCAA tournament at Jaspers.
Yeah, with like all the yes, this is one of them. And you said with the 440 team, and I was like, that's super interesting.
I said with a couple of people from 440 Sports who happen to be Tennessee fans. And what I told you is we didn't invite Adam Vingan of the Gold Standard podcast, who covers the Nashville Predators, because he's a Duke fan. You didn't want to come watch Tennessee basketball with us.
I love watching basketball, and I am not a Duke fan.
No,
I shouldn't have not been. I get why you didn't invite.
You're a Vandy fan.
Adam.
You're not a Tennessee fan.
I know, but it's March Madness.
Also, you want the truth? Here's the truth, folks. Go to Jasper's. The parking is free. The food is amazing. That's true. Also,
and I never get freaking invited to it.
We can't ever invite Erin anywhere because she's going to say no anyway. She's just always going to say no. So it just stopped with the courtesy invites.
You're wrong about that.
You're too fancy. You have too many fancy, cool friends doing too many cool, fancy things on the internet. And we're not cool enough for you. That's what it is.
That is a sad and untrue excuse, Braden. And I will no longer have it. I've never said no to going to Jasper's with you ever.
That's true. Jasper's is powerful.
That's what I'm saying. And that's why I'm good at ads. It's the only thing that can bring us together no matter what.
Go to Jasper's. Okay. Go to Jasper's where the power of the food will overcome the awfulness of the company. Is that what you're saying?
Well, when you say it like that, it sounds bad.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I'm just saying I've never said no. So if you ever want to hang out, just invite me to Jasper's. I might not do anything else. I might not want to be in your presence for any other reason, but I will. I've never said no to eating with you at Jasper's.
Yeah, Jasper's is pretty good. Go there, folks. Food's good. The parking's free. And there's a game room where they got all kinds of cool games. So go to Jasper's, everybody. Neal, great to see you, man. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So let me before we talk quarterback battle or state of the roster or the coaching staff, all that stuff. I'm just curious sort of what Ole Miss fans, how they view the future long-term with Lane Kiffin. His name is going to come up with NFL jobs pretty routinely from here on out, especially if he's winning 10 games a year. What do you see sort of the relationship being between Lane Kiffin, the university, the fans long-term?
Yeah, I'm always kind of reluctant to speak for a fan base because I'm not a fan, so it's kind of hard for me to know what they think. Look, you're exactly right. His name's going to come up for a number of reasons. It's always going to come up. Any media that is click-based, and I don't mean that as a negative, I just mean that as a matter of fact. Any media that is click-based knows that Lane Kiffin's name gets clicks. And so if you can write Lane Kiffin's name, you write it because it helps your numbers. Now, that being said, that if I just left it there, that would be flippant. The reality is Lane Kiffin's name comes up also frequently because Lane Kiffin and Lane Kiffin's representation puts that name out. They like his name being out. I think he's a guy that views any publicity as generally good publicity. So this is a complicated answer, and a lot of people, they just get mad at this. They want you to say Lane Kiffin's going to be at Ole Miss forever, and he's never leaving. And I think that's disingenuous. Is there a scenario where Lane Kiffin ends up being at Ole Miss for 6 or 7 years? Sure, absolutely. Ole Miss is paying him $7.5 million. I mean, start there. They're paying him $7.5 million. They are paying him big boy money. It's the SEC. The SEC is getting ready to launch into a new TV deal that is going to be lucrative for all 16 member institutions. With Texas and Oklahoma joining, the league becomes even more high profile. In other words, there just aren't that many places in college football that you can leave for. I mean, are there places inside the league that Lane Kiffin would leave? Sure. I mean, if Alabama offered him the job, would he go? Of course.
Right.
Is Alabama offering the job to Lane Kiffin? Probably not. So there's a limited number of places he could go. Now, I do think there's an NFL itch that he still has that I think he would probably want to scratch. I don't think he sees himself as the guy at Ole Miss for a long time. And again, that could change over time, and it could become something where he wants to be at Ole Miss and it works out and he starts to program build. Right now he's team building. He's using the portal incredibly well in a way of team building. Yet I don't know that that's not necessarily a sign of program building. And so It's complicated. They obviously like him. Lane Kiffin came in Ole Miss when Lane Kiffin got the job. Ole Miss had just come out of a disappointing season that ended with a loss in Starkville that was, accentuated by the Elijah Moore penalty and the dog pee thing and all that stuff. And it was kind of an embarrassing time. And Lane Kiffin comes in, and Ole Miss went from irrelevant to relevant very fast. Ole Miss went from kind of boring to pretty must-watch television really fast. And then last season, Ole Miss went 10-2. I mean, they went to the Sugar Bowl and they lost to Baylor in the Sugar Bowl, and the job that Lane Kiffin did with Matt Corral. And I mean, there's a lot there beyond just the craziness and the golf ball and all that stuff that kind of comes with Lane. He's done a hell of a job at Ole Miss so far. Yeah. So would they like for him to stay? Of course. I mean, he's fun and he gets it. He's, for a guy who is in person kind of aloof and shy and super reserved, to also be able to pull off that Twitter thing and the deal with when the camera's on to be this other person. It's a remarkable, he's a really complicated guy in that way, because when you just are around him on a daily basis, like we'll do press conferences, Braden, where you can barely hear the guy on a Monday. And then the same exact week, ESPN comes to town for game day and stuff, and he's on the set dressed, and all that stuff. And you're like, that's wild. So there's a lot there. I don't know. If you told me that he's gone after this season, I'd buy it. If you told me that he's here in 5 years, I'd buy it. It's the money makes it where, unless he's willing to take a pay cut, only a handful of places that you can go at this point, because Ole Miss is, he has won, and they have bumped him and $7.5 million puts you, I don't know where they are, 10th, 11th in the country in terms of paying their head coach. And so there are not a lot of places you can just go get tons more money. Ole Miss has proven that they'll pay, and with the SEC contract coming, they'll pay more if it's what it takes.
Yeah, there's so much to follow up on in that answer. I don't even know where to start. Other than Oxford's also a beautiful place to live as well. That $7 million goes a long way. Let's get to the roster. You mentioned kind of the portal. Certainly went and got Jackson Dart. You got Luke Altmaier's there, who's had more experience, sort of in Lane's system per se, but certainly not nearly the same talent level. Is there a quarterback battle in Oxford this spring and this offseason, or is it Jackson Dart's job?
I think there's a battle. And listen, I've tried to say this to people because Jackson Dart's not even 19 yet. Luke Altmaier's a really young guy. Luke Altmaier's this time, 2 years ago was still in high school. These are young guys, and they're going to take a step back at quarterback. Matt Corral was terrific the last 2 seasons, but Matt Corral at 19 years old was not the same Matt Corral that he was last fall when he just kind of willed Ole Miss. Matt Corral was more than the quarterback of that team last year. He was their leader. He was the vocal leader inside the locker room. He was the guy who provided energy. He was the guy who provided confidence. He was the guy who played hurt. They knew he was playing hurt. He provided toughness. He provided a personality. There was a lot there with Matt that you don't just immediately replace. I don't care how good Jackson Dart is or Luke Altmaier is. They're going to take a little bit of a step back at that position because Matt Corral developed over the course of time into a first-round pick, and they're not going to be that right away. So there's this tendency because Jackson Dart came from USC and it was the transfer portal and everybody wanted him and all of that. There's a tendency to go, no fall off. And listen, 2 years from now, if you told me that Jackson Dart's getting first-round looks and people are talking about it, I get it. I watched him on Saturday and I saw it.
Right.
There's a lot of skill there. There's a really high ceiling. He's got a ton of upside, but there's a lot of work to be done. He's not the quarterback today that Matt Corral was at Ole Miss in the fall. And that's not a criticism of Jackson. It's just there's a reason that, 4 NFL head coaches were in Oxford on Wednesday and 31 teams were there. And there's a reason that, Mike Tomlin and, Matt Rule and Mike McCarthy were studying every move that Matt Corral made. It was because they're thinking about making him the face of their franchise.
So combine all of that, because I think that's pretty rational. Like, certainly he's got the upside to be the starter, but how fast does he reach Matt Corral levels? I think everybody needs to sort of take a step back on that, because when you package that with breaking in new coordinators, I mean, Jeff Lebby's gone to Oklahoma. It's not only just that. It's also sort of been this wave of talent that this organization, this university has produced at both receiver and running back. They're losing 2,000 yards worth of guys out of the backfield. They just keep throwing dudes into the league at wide receiver and they just keep replacing them. Like, again, I'm in Nashville. We got AJ Brown here. There's DK Metcalf, Elijah Moore. Then they lose Drummond and all these other guys. Like, so how difficult is it going to be? Because we trust Lane Kiffin it sort of implicitly in terms of offensive design. Like, what is the deciding factor on how quickly the offense can rebound? Is it replacing the talent around the quarterback? Is it just the quarterback? Is it the coordinators? Give me your sense of how all of the pieces are going to fit together.
Well, I think this is the brilliance of Lane Kiffin, and he's shown this from back when he was at USC and then at Alabama as an offensive coordinator. He did it at FAU on a much smaller scale, and he's done it at Ole Miss in the last 2 years. If you look at it, the first year that he got to Ole Miss, Elijah Moore was the kind of the focal point of the offense. They moved him around. They made sure that he got the ball, and then last season it was more about Corral, and they didn't have an Elijah Moore. They didn't have a Kenny Yeboah at tight end. They were kind of having to mix and match. They had a bunch of different running backs that did different things, but the offense was built around Corral. So I have no doubt that he'll figure out how to accentuate the positives that he has. I think they're going to be better at running back. I know they lost 3 guys. They also added 3 guys, and the 3 guys they added, I think it's a better mix. But now wide receiver, as of today, they don't have a Braylon Sanders, much less an Elijah Moore. I don't know that they have a Dontario Drummond. The one guy that, hey, he's going to go catch 70, 80 balls. He's got great hands. He's going to get open with the big body in the middle of the field. They're better at tight end. The guy that's going to help them instantly more than Jackson Dart is his former teammate at USC, who's now his teammate at Ole Miss, and Michael Trigg is the kind of tight end that Lane Kiffin has had a lot of success with at every step of his career. They're going to be good up front on offense. They went out and added Mason Brooks from Western Kentucky, and it let them move Nick Broker inside to guard, which is probably where he needs to play. It let them move Jeremy James to left tackle. And I think Jeremy is a potential kind of elite talent at left tackle, and you'll see that there. So they're going to be better up front. So offensively, I think they'll figure it out. But again, you get back into this feeling that there won't be any kind of a fall off. And I always encourage those people, go back and watch the Arkansas game from a year ago, watch the Tennessee game from a year ago, and realize just how vital Matt Corral was to those games. I mean, if Matt Corral wasn't damn near perfect in those games, you just don't win them. And they did because of Corral. So there's and Matt had a learning curve in the SEC. Matt played some. And so I think whether it's Dart or whether it's Altmaier, it's either one. There's this, both of them. For either one, it's their first SEC start when they make it. Dart started some games at USC, and Luke played a lot, like against Baylor, for example, in the Sugar Bowl when Matt got hurt. But this will be the first time that one of them takes the field at Ole Miss as the starting quarterback. It'll be their first start. So there's going to be some growing pains, I think is the word I'm looking for.
So you mentioned the roster building versus program building, and obviously on defense we saw again, not one of the best defenses in the SEC, but significantly improved from the year before in terms of big plays allowed, yardage, points, all that stuff, every metric. A lot of that was you got to give DJ Durkin credit for that. He's now at A&M. How much is just overall growth of a program that Lane Kiffin is sort of building? How much of it was just DJ Durkin? What's the state of the defensive roster? What do we make on that side of the ball? Also with new coaches.
I think you do have to give DJ a ton of credit because when they walked in and took that job, the defensive talent was just lacking. It was they didn't have enough bodies. They didn't have enough speed. They weren't big enough. They had a dearth of linebacker play that was frightening. Like, it's almost like, did you just not, but when it boiled down to, they just failed to recruit linebackers. They didn't try, and they tried to recruit them, just didn't get them. And they fixed that in so many ways. I mean, I think by the end of last season, Ole Miss was pretty good on defense. Bordering on really good. It got overshadowed in the Sugar Bowl against Baylor because Corral got hurt, and so much of the focus was on his injury and then Altmaier and Ole Miss's offensive struggles. But Ole Miss played really well against a very good Baylor offense that night. It just didn't matter. They were very good towards the end of the season, and DJ's gone. Chris Partridge was the co-defensive coordinator, so it's not like you're changing everything schematically or anything like that. Some of the players have referred to it as a tweak here and there, but it's basically the same defense. They lose Sam Williams, who was as impactful on the defensive end as Matt Corral was on the offensive side. But I think they're potentially pretty good up front. They added Troy Brown from Central Michigan, who is kind of this year's version of Chance Campbell in a lot of ways. I think they're going to be okay at linebacker. They're much better in the secondary. They've really turned that from, in 2020, it may have been the weakness of the roster, to 2022, where it may be the strength, which is, speaks to their ability to use the portal, their ability to evaluate some guys in recruiting. They've had some success with DBs. Look, I think defensively, they've got a chance to make another step up. They went from being horrific in 2020 to pretty average in 2021, and I think they could be a little above average in 2022. I think they have to be, though. I think if they give up 51 points in an SEC game this year, they're probably not winning that game. And that happened to them last year. They gave up 51 points and won a game. That won't happen this fall.
Well, I'll let you go on this. Just, it sounds like tempering expectations for an offense that's got a lot of new pieces in a lot of places, but some slow progress in other areas for a program that still has the guy that sort of makes it all go in charge. So does that feel like a fair assessment? If I was going to say state of the roster, state of the union, state of sort of expectations for this summer, is that, hey, we're still a pretty good football team. We're still going to be competitive in most games, probably going to have a winning record, but we're not going to be as good as last year. Is that a fair assessment of where this team is going to be in the summer?
it's probably more overreaching than I would go. I think they can be a really good football team. They have an interesting schedule. If you look at it, right, they have the front end of their schedule is really navigable. They could go 7-0 out of the gate. I mean, depending on what you think about Kentucky, they get Kentucky here. Depending on what you think about Auburn, if you are as selling on
what
Auburn.
What do you think of Auburn?
I mean, Auburn's pretty simple, really. I mean, you keep having these coups, and you have no end game with the coup. It's like, hey, let's kill the dictator, but then what? And then what is, hey, let's not kill him.
It's whack-a-mole is what it is.
Yeah, now that we've killed him, you know what? Let's put him back.
Yeah, right.
And then he's all broken. I mean, he's like the Humpty Dumpty, and they just keep putting him back. And so my anticipation is that at some point Auburn has to pay for that on the field. I think this, looking at them on paper, this looks like a year that Auburn begins to pay for that. Which is interesting because one of the names that would come up if that were to happen is Lane Kiffin. So it all goes together. But if you back to your original question, if you buy that Auburn is going to be down, and is it conceivable that Ole Miss starts the season 7-0? Yeah, sure. Now then after that, man, it's murderer's row. It's an incredibly good Alabama team that comes in. You've got to go to LSU. Kelly wins everywhere he ever goes. First year, they'll be excited in LSU. It's going to be a new energy down there. They got to go to Texas A&M. Texas A&M is going to have Ole Miss circled. They have to go to Arkansas. Ole Miss typically does not do well in Fayetteville, and I think Arkansas is going to be a good team again next season. Mm-hmm. And then they get Mississippi State, who would have trying to avoid 3 Egg Bowl losses in a row with a very experienced team with Will Rogers. And the last 5 games, it's like, whoa, you could play well and go 1-4.
Yeah.
And so, but the flip side of that is that you could start hot, play with this, kind of find yourself. You have lots of time, build a lot of confidence, and you're 6-1, 7-0, ranked 7th in the country or whatnot. And Alabama comes in and you're like, hey, it's a free shot. It's okay. And even when you lose, you turn around and you go win games, and you look up and you're 10-2 again. I mean, is that conceivable? Sure. Would I bet on it? Probably not. But, I think it's an 8-4 team. It's one that, if you're looking at it from a program standpoint, as long as they can kind of continue to build and recruit, and as long as Kiffin stays and that kind of thing, I think it's a super successful kind of a season that you can build on, because whether it's Dart or Altmaier or whatever, whoever that quarterback is in 2023 is going to be more experienced and more seasoned and that kind of thing. So, but if you're looking at it as hey, this is, and I've seen people do this, and I just shake my head kind of like, hey, this is going to be a national championship contender. It's like, probably not. You're probably not there yet, because you just don't close. You don't close that gap in that period of time, although they've come really close. Like last year, look, if they win at Auburn, which was a weird game, if they win at Auburn, maybe they're in the playoffs. I don't know. It's a remarkable accomplishment what he's done. But they're going to be good. They're going to be fun. They'll once again, they will be must-watch television, I think.
And I think what's interesting in college football, which makes it fun, is context is so important. And what you do in a rebuilding situation is almost as much a sign of progress as how good you are when you're good. And so I think if they go 8-4 after losing all their coordinators, their star quarterback and all that stuff, and they're still able to maintain, that's almost as much a step forward as anything, even though it feels like you're coming back to the pack a couple of wins. So it's going to be a fascinating year. Like you said, must see television, must click content on Lane Kiffin. That is for sure. Neal,
for sure.
Thank you so much, man, for giving us so much of your time. We do appreciate it. And we'll talk this summer sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That about does it, Aaron. Neal McCready there from Rebel Grove. Hope everybody enjoyed that conversation. Really insightful stuff about, listen, the Ole Miss could take a couple of steps back, but it could actually be a year of progress for them because they're losing so much. So however long Lane Kiffin's in town, they're going to be interesting, and he's must easy for me to say, must watch TV. There you go. So there you have it. There you have it, man. Good
I'm
show.
ready to pick my Ole Miss road game for the year. I like to go to at least one. So I think we should pick one.
You mean the road game, like in the Grove?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, road game for me because I don't live in
trip.
Oxford. Road trip.
Yeah.
Road trip to the Grove, which
who they got in the Grove
they've
this
got
year?
Kentucky at home. That could be fun.
Oh, that would be a lot of fun.
They've got Kentucky at home. They've got Arkansas at home. LSU. Wait, no.
They have Arkansas at home?
No. Hold on. I messed that up. Caught myself on the F word. Barely.
Say fuck. It's fine.
Dang it. Hold on. It pulled up the wrong schedule. False alarm, everyone. Central Arkansas. No,
we're not going to Central Arkansas.
It is. They do. Okay. They do have Kentucky at home. I was just wrong about.
Yeah, let's do that one.
The other one. Let's do that. Yeah. And it's October 1st. All right. Let's go in my planner.
There you go. And by the way, former Ole Miss head coach, David Cutcliffe, I believe, is returning to the SEC as like a special assistant to commissioner for football relations. That's a fancy title. I'm glad that he's going to be like, I would use him as a sounding board for all of life. You know what I mean? Like I would just use David Cutcliffe as like, hey, which amp should go to my speakers? Like what do I do as a father in this situation? Like I would ask David Cutcliffe about everything. Anything,
whether or not he's ever experienced it. He seems like a good sounding board for advice. I support that much better than me.
Go to Jasper's, everybody. Jasper's over on West End is the next evolution of the sports bar here in Nashville. Game room, great drink specials, free parking, just awesome menu by Deb Paquette and Four Top Hospitality. So make sure you go to Jasper's, everybody, and check all that great stuff out. Aaron Dugan, where can people find you?
Well, tonight they can find me at Jasper's because I have no groceries since after being in Cabo. So I'll be there tonight. You can find me on Twitter at the Aaron Dugan or Instagram Aaron_Dugan.
You can follow me, Braden Gall, at Braden Gall. Thank you guys all for listening and watching on the YouTubes. Make sure you're checking out the YouTubes and just click all the subscribe buttons everywhere where there's a button, right? If it's on a social account, follow the social account. If it's on a YouTube channel, follow the YouTube. Just click all the subscribe buttons everywhere you can. Help support the company. We really, really appreciate it and all the work that Aaron puts in for all this stuff for you guys to watch it. So special thanks to Neal McCready for hanging out with us as well. For Aaron, my name is Braden. Thank you guys all for listening. This has been Fringe Element here on the 440 Sports Network. Talk to you again next week.
Bye.